word in all of gaming. In a way, getting nerfed is
most
like
nerfed Pokemon every generation.
You're
Alright.
literally too strong for the game to handle your existence. And over the course of Pokemon's 9 generations,
yeah, I'm just not in the mood for bots. They didn't tell me what to react to, they just listed their YouTube channel. And it's one of those spammy ones. So yeah, I have no patience for it. Because I've watched enough YouTube, I know that they go to big popular YouTube saying, well, this sucks. You should watch mine. This is this. I'm like, alright then, bud. You're not even a real name there. You know? Alright. There's a lot of weird, like, Pokemon that could just, like, destroy the world. Okay, we'll do this here. You can't make my life easier.
Maybe the most dreaded word in all of gaming. In a way, getting nerfed is like a badge of honor. You were literally too strong for the game to handle your existence.
Yeah.
And over the course of Pokemon's 9
I know some aren't allowed in like
several
tournament
of its
play.
most powerful Pokemon have been nerfed in a variety of ways, both directly and indirectly. So good morning everybody, good morning, it's JPR, and today we're going through history to find Pokemon's most nerfed game breakers. The nerfs made from Gen 1 to Gen 2 are very well documented, to the point where I kind of feel like a broken record repeating them, but
was it Mewtwo nerfed? I don't know, I haven't paid attention to Pokemon since Johto.
Gen 2's biggest priority was nerfing Gen 1's most threatening types into the ground, or at least back to reality. Psychic and Normal. This was partly done through the introduction of Steel, a type that resisted both of these former threats, and Dark, a widely available type that could finally do substantial damage to Psychic types. Given that there were hardly any damaging bug-type moves at the time, and ghost types were harder to find than a stick of deodorant at a Super Smash Bros. Tournament, Psychic types were also the group that suffered the most from Game Freak splitting the special stat apart, as their whole shtick was having a high special stat, which made them just as bulky as they were offensive. Some escaped relatively unscathed, like Alakazam, but others, like Exeggutor, weren't so lucky, whose special defense was nearly sliced in half, from 125 to only 65. Yeah, Exeggutor was effectively a pseudo-legendary by Gen 1 standards, but that would no longer be the case moving forward. And unfortunately, this was just the start of Exeggutor's demise, as Gen 4 officially put this former Titan to rest with the widespread introduction of new powerful bug-type damaging moves like X-Scissor, Bug Buzz, and probably the most influential, U-Turn. A move that is available to nearly half the relevant Pokemon in the game, and an amazing utility move found on nearly any competitive team. And Gen 5 would only throw dirt on top of its grave with a nerf made to Explosion. More on that later. Pivoting to the aforementioned normal types, they not only suffer from the introduction of Steel, but also changes made to the strongest move in all of Gen 1, Hyper Beam, which used to skip the recharge period if you managed to KO an opponent. So yeah, those kids in the playground weren't lying, you really could just spam Hyper Beam and win. No longer the case here. Of all the overpowered Gen 1 normal types, one sticks out among the rest, Tauros. Like Exeggutor, Tauros also lost a decent amount of special attack, being lowered from a decent 70 that allowed it to take advantage of moves like Fire Blast, Blizzard, and Thunderbolt, you know, just normal type things, to a pitiful base 45, practically making most of its moves unusable. And without the overpowered Hyper Beam or critical hits being based on speed anymore, basically every single major mechanic change served to screw Tauros over in Gen 2. It almost felt maliciously targeted.
Hey, Night Runner. How are you? You're up late.
Articuno, who in the span of only a few generations went from one of the strongest
no, we're reacting to
30 points of special attack in Gen 2. Blizzard,
most nerfed Pokemon in every generation.
Was lowered from 90% accuracy to 70% when somebody at Game Freak finally looked at the code and said,
currently, but post the links.
And when Stealth Rocks were finally introduced in Gen 4, it was pretty much GG for the old-timer legendary. Now, in the transition from Gen 2 to Gen 3, it's hard to pin down exactly the most nerfed Pokemon here. As for the most part, Gen 3 is mechanically very similar to Gen 2. And no Pokemon had any substantial stat or
was
move
playing Rocket League
well,
with Buddy. Oh, how fun!
Who lost the ability to use growth since the event Eevee that could learn it was trapped in Gen 2, with the Game Boy Color not being able to transfer Pokemon to the Game Boy Advance. This is more of a Pokemon Showdown nerf than anything though, as I'm pretty confident that most competitive players on link cables back in the day didn't have the New York City exclusive Growth Eevee, or even knew of its existence at the time. Also, isn't it funny that Leafeon is one of the only Evolutions who's never been able to learn Growth? So aside from the Evolutions, pretty much
that is a little weird.
Tanky Sleep Stylers were nerfed, thanks to one minor change with the move Sleep Talk. Back in Gen 2, Sleep Talk could make a Pokemon use Rest and restore its HP while it was already asleep. And this basically ruined the Gen 2 meta, depending on who you ask, but if you're asking me, It ruined the Gen 2 meta. Fight me in the comments. It turned most battles into competitive Pokemon Sleep matches. But starting in Gen 3, if Sleep Talk randomly selected Rest, then Rest will fail, meaning Sleep Talk only works 2/3 of the time now. Of all the Pokemon, this was likely to the detriment of Snorlax the most. Gen 2 Snorlax was arguably the most meta-centralizing Pokemon of all time, as basically only a Snorlax was capable of KOing another Snorlax. Faced off against any other Pokemon, it was virtually unkillable thanks to Gen 2's awful sleep mechanics, and the lack of any substantial fighting-type moves. Gen 3 Snorlax is still really good, don't get me wrong, but it certainly was the Pokemon most affected by this
Alright,
mechanic
ads are
change.
coming up soon.
The biggest mechanic change from Gen 4, of course, was that of the physical special split. Instead of moves now being physical or special depending on
If that quad link goes through, that quad's so, like, it's gonna be a nightmare, because I don't know crap about Pokemon.
Alakazam and Gengar are both Pokemon who lost their ability to effectively use the elemental punches as special moves. This gave both of them insane coverage options in the first 3 generations. But now they'd mostly be restricted to the basic moves of Psychic, Shadow Ball, and the always reliable Focus Blast. Whoa! Ah crap, even that joke missed the mark. Although these two Pokemon were still good, they became much more two-dimensional and predictable in their playstyles. Unfortunately, these Pokemon were never granted tools to replace the ones they lost. Bayonet is another casualty of this mechanic change. As a rare ghost type with a high physical attack stat, Bayonet was the best user of the formerly physical move Shadow Ball in Gen 3. But with it being forced to settle for the comparably weaker Shadow Claw in Gen 4 and having almost no other
Kingdom Hearts
physical moves to take advantage of, any threat this Pokemon used to pose evaporated overnight. Oh, and as mentioned earlier, the creation of Stealth Rock pretty much ensured that Pokemon like Articuno and Charizard would never be top-tier threats ever again. Unless a certain new mechanic would be introduced to give a fan-favorite Pokemon not 1, but 2 absurdly powerful new forms, but I'm sure that will never happen.
Oh
Also,
yeah, the
very
Mega
discreetly
Evolution
in the background,
thingies.
2 Pokemon started getting nerfed in Gen 4, and it would steadily continue all the way until Gen 7, and those 2 are Latias and Latios. With the introduction of U-Turn and Sucker Punch, and Pursuit becoming a physical move in this generation, the Lati twins lost a lot of what made them so broken in Gen 3. Physical attackers would continue to get a lot stronger throughout Gen 5, which only made the Latis worse with their comparably lower defense stat, and their previously untouchable 110 base speed became increasingly average over the years. And finally, in Gen 7, Soldew, the item that made them the most broken, was substantially nerfed, Fairies became a lot stronger, and Z-moves took away their biggest niche, which was breaking walls with Draco Meteor, as almost any Pokemon could fulfill that role now. So while these two never had a
Streaming
huge
channel,
direct
thank you so
nerf
much.
outside
Oh,
of Soldew, general
gifted
power
the
creep
tier
and
1 subscription. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. He's 3rd from Charizard form. Oh, hold on. Let me update my counter real quick. Thank you. Thank you. I really do appreciate it. That's very generous. My little counter thing here is just so we can unlock emote slots eventually. Yeah, you guys watered it. Let's go. We're at what, 23? Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. Oh, a bunch of them. Yeah, hold on. Okay, a bunch of people at midnight unsubscribed, so it's gonna go down a little bit, but we still appreciate it. Here, we gotta change. I gotta manually do it. That's fine. Still, we went from... Yeah, reset the goal to 18. Come on. 18. There we go. Let's go, Rip. No, it's alright. 80's a lot. I'm not in a big rush to get it. For emote slots. I'm not in a big rush. Like, when I get the emotes, it's most likely it'll be like, they'll be in Discord before we hit the emote slots for Twitch. It's nothing too crazy. I just appreciate it. Anybody when they can stop by. But it's gonna go. We gonna reach? Evening. Hi, Furrow. How are you? Set the goal. Yeah, we had update the subscriber goal. Yeah, we're doing some reaction content. Gonna be good for a while. Yeah, I should be good hopefully next few months, so I'll be able to be active weekly videos. I ran out of stuff. Anyways, let's get back to this. Yeah, what Mike had editing there for. We're mighty close to getting the 1K follow goal for the new outfit. Yes, I'm excited. I'll have to dust off, make sure I still have the files. That's gonna be the fun part. Or get it recommissioned.
Contributed to them falling off. And hey, if you've learned anything so far, it would mean a lot to me if you subscribed. We're less than 10,000 subs from 250,000, so every person counts. It's free.
Wow, this guy's got a lot of big
Once again,
numbers.
The biggest nerfs is a bit of a tough task.
Fat feet hit BRB. Sorry. Whoop. Hit BRB instead of the cat thing. Sorry. It's like right next to me on my stream deck.
Again, finding the biggest nerfs is a bit of a tough task.
It is. There's so many Pokemon.
The biggest nerf in this generation was Explosion, which no longer cuts the defense of opposing Pokemon in half. So it actually is 250 power and not 500. This made basically every popular Explosion lead like Azelf, Metagross, and of course Exeggutor, poor guy, fall off instantly. But speaking of leads, this generation nerfed them in general with the introduction of the team preview feature for online Wi-Fi battles, which would give you a pretty good idea of what Pokemon they were going to lead with. Usually Rotom Wash or Politoed in a lot of cases. And then instead of using a traditional lead, you could just choose to counter your opponent's lead. Although this isn't a nerf from one generation to the next, it did affect one Gen 5 Pokemon significantly, Zoroark. As its gimmick of disguising itself as another Pokemon lost almost all of its surprise factor right out of the gate. But if there's two things that competitive
was like
Gen
the Ditto,
5
he
are
just
well documented for,
mimics.
it's Weather Wars and overpowered dragons, which Gen 6 would do its best to nerf both. Weather-setting abilities like Drought, Drizzle, and Sandstream, sorry, snow warning, you won't be relevant for another decade, were all limited to just 5 turns instead of being infinite. This made the previously dominant weather setters of Politoed and Ninetales mostly irrelevant going forward, except in VGC where Wolfglick still managed to see success with Drizzle Politoed. World champ difference, I guess. And with dragon types, well, I literally just documented this in my video on why Pokemon doesn't need a 19th type, which you can watch right after this one, but it's pretty self-explanatory. But maybe the most nerfed Pokemon in Gen 6 is a Pokemon whose true potential we never actually saw, Chandelure. In Gen 5, Chandelure's hidden ability was Shadow Tag, an ability that makes it impossible for the opponent to switch out. With Chandelure's incredible base 145 special attack stat, which was nearly unheard of before Mega Evolutions existed, it could have easily been the scariest revenge killer of all time while holding a Choice Scarf. But Game Freak must have felt the disturbance in the Force, and decided that they would never release Shadow Tag Chandelure in Gen 5. And when X and Y rolled around, Chandelure's hidden ability was covertly changed to Infiltrator. Still a fine ability, but definitely not one that would have launched Chandelure into the stratosphere like Shadow Tag would have. But after Gen 6 fundamentally changed the meta forever with its ridiculously power-creeped new Pokemon and Mega Evolutions, Gen 7 probably had the most targeted nerfs of any generation. The first notable one was handed down to Talonflame, who saw its signature ability Gale Wings get beaten with a stick until it cried for mercy. Gale Wings used to grant priority to every single flying-type attack at all times, but starting in Gen 7, this effect was changed so that Gale Wings only works if Talonflame has full HP. Stealth Rocks were already pretty bad news for Talonflame in Gen 6, with it losing half of its health whenever it switched in, but now it would lose half of its health and its entire ability in the process. Personally, I feel like this one went a bit too far. I think I would have made it so that Gale Wings only works at 50% HP or above. By making it have to be 100%, you literally only get one Brave Bird, and then the ability just takes a vacation until the next battle. Another Pokemon who was nerfed this generation, and honestly unjustly so, was Gengar. Mega Gengar was a huge threat in Gen 6 because of the exact same reasons that Shadow Tag Chandelure would have been a threat. So instead of nerfing Mega Gengar by getting rid of Shadow Tag, Game Freak had the brilliant idea to nerf Vanilla Gengar, taking away Levitate and replacing it with Cursed Body, turning what was an immunity to ground into a full-blown weakness. And now that Mega Gengar doesn't exist, this just sticks out as a bafflingly bad decision on Game Freak's part. But speaking of unjust nerfs, Gengar wasn't the only one, because Darkrai also suffered with Dark Void being nerfed to 50% accuracy in this gen, purely because of Smeargle using it for its own gain in VGC. That's like if somebody stole your car, robbed a bank with it, and then after you got your car back, the police limited its top speed to 30 miles per hour so it wouldn't get stolen again. At that point, the only person being inconvenienced is you! And to make matters worse, Game Freak made it so that Smeargle couldn't copy Dark Void anymore from this point forward. So the nerf really only applies to Darkrai, who did nothing wrong! Also, some other Mega Evolutions got ability nerfs like Mega Kangaskhan and Mega Salamence, but they were still incredibly broken, so it really didn't mean much. But after the Tapus effectively ruined VGC for a whole generation, Gen 8 came with nerfs to all the terrain effects, decreasing their power buff from 50% to 30%, except for Misty Terrain, which has oddly never boosted the power of Fairy-type moves. I guess they don't really need it, though. When it comes to true irony, the Sword and Shield Pokemon, Aegislash, was the only Pokemon with nerf stats in Sword and Shield. This is also the first generation to remove entire attacks from the game, and one of those was Pursuit, which served as a substantial nerf to many relevant dark types like Tyranitar and Weavile. Return was also taken out of the game, and as the strongest widely available normal-type move, this was a huge nerf to normal-type attackers like Diggersby, Staraptor, and Mega Lopunny, who, well, I guess she just doesn't exist anymore in this gen. Oh yeah, Megas are gone, that's probably worth mentioning, right? That's like 48 nerfed Pokemon right there. While Gen 9 didn't remove nearly as many attacks in the game as Gen 8, it did something a lot stranger. Just taking moves away from Pokemon while keeping the move around. Rillaboom lost almost all of its good attacks before the DLC just brought them all back. Seriously, what was the point of that? And there are countless other examples I could name, but like Rillaboom, the DLC fixed most of them. But for more specifics, we obviously have Greninja, who lost its Ash Greninja form, and had its other ability, Protean, substantially nerfed to only have the user change types once per switch-in. Regieleki was nerfed both directly and indirectly this generation, with his signature ability Transistor being reduced from a 50% power buff to only 30%.
Music. Nice.
Oddly, its companion Regidrago kept its ability at a 50% buff, making it one of the only instances where a legendary duo hasn't been kept the exact same. But even bigger than that, Regieleki also lost Dynamax, which means it can no longer make itself incredibly bulky or set up electric terrain for free. Terastallization has actually buffed Regieleki in the singles format, with Terra Ice giving it the holy combination of Stab Thunderbolt and Ice Terra Blast to hit the entire type chart for super effective or neutral damage. But without Dynamax, this Pokemon has basically disappeared from VGC. It might actually be worse than Regidrago now. Speaking of nerfed legendary duos, we also have Zacian and Zamazenta, who both lost a pretty substantial 20 points in their base stat totals, and their abilities now only activate once instead of every time they switch in. But because Zamazenta got body press in this generation, in a surprising twist, it's actually been doing a lot better than its sibling Zacian, who dominated the Gen 8 meta. So while on paper both of them were nerfed, in practice only Zacian really felt the effects. So who do you think was the most nerfed Pokemon of all time? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. But don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed.
Oh, that was great.